Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council, navigating the human experience together.
Hafade, Tiro, and welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry, and today we are talking journalism in the Marianas, and our guest today is a longtime journalist and editor here in our islands, Mark Rabago. Mark, Happy New Year. Welcome.
Half a day, Miss Cathy, and Happy New Year. Welcome to 2025.
So you have been working in journalism here in the Marianas for over 2 decades. How did you get into this line of work?
Oh, 23 years, long time. I started my journalism career back in Manila, Philippines. That's where I grew up. You can say I started with Philippine Post. It's a daily, a small daily in the news in the Philippines. But before that, I was part of the Philippine National Police media team of the Philippine National Police Chief. It was a short gig, wasn't really that big an office. But when I transitioned to Philippine Post, it was more of a feature writer. Then when my editor got hired for Manila Times, he brought me in. So I worked also for Manila Times for a few years. Then in 2001, I had the opportunity to move to Saipan. I was recruited to be a reporter for Saipan Tribune. So I joined Saipan Tribune in February 14 of all days, 2001. It was a bummer to leave my girlfriend then, my then girlfriend, and just before the Day of Hearts. So yeah, 23 years.
Saipan Tribune, of course, just closed at the end of December 2024. But you were mentioning that your first week on the job here was kind of baptism by fire?
Oh yeah, because at that time, Saipan Tribune had, I think, 2 reporters and 1 editor. My editor then was Aldwin Fajardo, and my 2 colleagues were Edith Alejandro and Marian Maraya. And they needed somebody to cover Capitol Hill, because I think at that time, Marian was covering community, and Edith was covering police and court, so they needed somebody to immediately cover the Capitol Hill. I think, in a way, they wanted to see if I was worth it to be recruited on Saipan, if I had the stuff. So it was basically baptism by fire, and I was really thankful that our mutual friend Terry Flores was there to help me out. Remember her big contraption of a recorder that she uses when she used
audio recorder
so
about this big, 5 pounds.
So she had she taught me the ropes. Yeah. I remember vividly, my first coverage was the confirmation hearing of public auditor Mike Sablan.
Yes.
So it was crazy. I could say Mike Sablan is my first local friend here, because immediately after, I think the next Tuesday, they had a Rotary meetings. He invited me, and he paid for my lunch.
Wow, that's a good start to a career.
It's a good start, yeah. So I just told him, if anything, if there's a story on OPA, hopefully there's no conflict, so don't blame me.
Well, I invited you here, and thank you for accepting, because I thought you would be a good person to kind of give our viewers insight into how news works, what the newsroom is like, so that the consumers of what it is that newsrooms produce can really understand what are some of the considerations and the procedures and stuff like that. Can you start us off maybe with I'll say you, even though you're no longer with the Tribune, but how do you decide what you're going to write about or what you're going to put in the paper?
Actually, it changed.
Or what you're not going to write about.
So the social media age, you could actually take cues from social media, looking at Facebook, following up on stories, what's happening in the courts. When I first came here, it's basically the editor who gives me what do I need to follow up on. Like the case of the Capitol Hill, there's usually sessions, hearings, or bills being tackled. So you go there and basically sit down, try to digest what's happening there, and look at worthy news items that you would be reporting. It's because I probably spent like my first 3 months here doing the usual news beat. But after, I think it was March or April, I don't remember now, that's 23 years ago, they needed somebody to cover sports. And I had a bit of a background in sports, and I love sports. So they made me cover the mobile games, which is baseball tournament between the CNMI, Guam, and Palau. I'm not sure if FSM was also participating during that time. So I transitioned to sports, and basically for the next 10 years, I was the sports reporter / sports editor for Saipan Tribune. So yeah.
How do you go about getting your story to make sure that, number one, it's accurate and that it's fair? What are some considerations?
Well, if it's a sensitive topic like the courts, obviously you have to get the court documents for it. And if it's like a he said, she said kind of thing, you have to get both sides. If it's controversial, then we have to really wait for the other side to have their response to make it fair.
That brings to mind the question of deadlines. Like, you have a paper, sometimes you have a certain number of stories you may have to, or a certain number of words you need to produce for the day. How does that figure into either waiting for somebody to respond to an inquiry, or deciding to, or the depth of your story, or things like that?
Ideally, most stories should already be in the editor's desk or in the editor's email by 6 p.m. Because our deadline is 7 p.m. We have to give everything to the artist to lay it out, for graphics department to lay out the story in the graphics department. But sometimes we have no choice but to wait, and some reporters take their time writing. So I think during the final weeks and months of Saipan Tribune, I could wait like until 7:30 or 8 at the most, if it's really an important story. But ideally, they have to send their stories by 6. For sports, it's easier because the sports reporter usually covers the day before. So if he or she already has the stats, then by 4 p.m. it would have been good. It would be good. They already have the story.
How do you decide what will make the news that day, or what maybe is not so important, or what really, I guess, more important, like out of all of the things that you could potentially cover or have assign a reporter to cover, some things we have time for and some things we don't?
Usually there's like holy trinity of sports beats here. That's the governor's office, courts and cops, and the legislature. So any stories coming from them are usually page 1 material. Now it just depends on what is a heavier topic, a more interesting topic. Usually a topic when it comes to money, because Saipan Tribune used to prioritize or think of itself as a business and community paper. So anything to do with money, fiscal, are usually banner material.
Okay.
And then if unfortunately there's a death, and that's banner material too, or a theft or something big, an accident. It's usually banner material for the newspaper.
What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding people who are not part of the news process have about how the news works, or how editing or reporting works?
I could just, from experience, we don't have any bias. If you don't want to be part of the paper or be in the front page, then don't do something that would make you land in the front page. So we try to be as fair as possible. If you want to get your side, then we'll give you an avenue to air your side. So yeah, we're not in a witch hunt, just to say. We're not here to condemn somebody or grill somebody in the state of public opinion. So yeah.
In the instance where you find that the media outlet has made a mistake, what is the proper way to address that?
Erratum. We'll just,
which is a Greek word.
Yeah.
I mean, a Latin word.
We made a mistake and we're correcting it. Yeah. That's an easier part. And if they want a better apology, then we'll give them another avenue to. That happened quite a few times, like misspelled name or misspelled company. So I think there was a case back in early 2000s when one of the reporters said that it was this company, but it was another company that made the mistake.
Ouch.
So we had to run an ad, a 1/4 ad, basically saying it's our mistake. Said it ran, I think on page 2 for a month. And it so happened that that company is a major advertiser, so we had no choice but to do that. And it's mea culpa. We accepted our mistake, and I wouldn't say we paid for it, but we tried to make amends.
And it wasn't anything intentional.
It wasn't any intentional, but the thing is, everybody learns from their mistake, and I bet you that reporter won't make that mistake again.
Hopefully we learn from our mistakes.
Hopefully.
I'll say we because I make mistakes.
Of course, nobody's perfect.
Well, when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about journalism and the humanities, and also the intrigues of journalism here in the Marianas, maybe in specific. Yeah, we'll be back after this break.
Looking for resources about Marianas history, culture, and more? Well, check out the Northern Marianas Humanities Council's collection. Our extensive video, audio, and photographic library can be found on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at 670 Humanities. Or check out the written resources on our website at nmhcouncil.org. And for those who prefer a good book, we also have a selection of local publications for purchase. So, dive in, explore, and share your comments as we navigate the human experience together.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Mark Rabago. He's a longtime reporter and editor here in the Marianas, most recently with Saipan Tribune. Let's talk a little bit, just briefly, how do you feel journalism and the humanities in general are related?
Yeah, it's a very good question. One of the disciplines of humanities is journalism and history, right? And what is the first draft of history? The news from the journalism, from the newspaper.
Yeah.
So it's intricately tied with the humanities. And what do we write about? What humanity does, what men do, their accomplishments, their failures, their controversies. So we are like a human record of what's happening. I remember back in college when we're talking about Philippine history, there is like a town barker who delivers the news from the chief of the village. He's called a Humalahokan.
Wow.
Who basically translates to shouter of the news. So we are basically that, but in more digital and probably physical form. So it's a way of keeping in touch with what's happening, because what are humans? We interact. We talk about, we have history. And then where do we get it from? What's happening? What's current events? So it's tied into the humanities, journalism. You can't have journalism and humanities without the other.
And also, you know, especially like with the council, with the many projects they do, they always try to bring out diverse opinions, views, balanced perspective, helping people to put themselves in the shoes of other people. And that's kind of also what journalism and news does.
Of course. We have our opinion page. We have debates on not only the opinion pages, what the columnists think. We also have poems. Joey Connolly, my good friend, who's now moving to Variety. Good luck, man. Zaldi, treat him right. So yeah, and then what's the discourse people talk about in the streets or in the water coolers, near the water coolers? It's what's in the newspaper. It's what's on the website, what's on the online news, what's on social media. And who brings them that? Journalists. So, you know, they say in the age of social media, we don't need journalists anymore. We need them. Who's going to vet the news? Who's going to tell them that this is 100% certainty? Who gives them the other side of the coin when it comes to topics, serious topics? So there's needs some vetting. Needs some more responsibility. We can't just have a talking head there.
Opinions.
Yeah,
and
opinions.
say this is news.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's not news.
Reporting the news in the Marianas presents its own unique set of benefits or strengths and challenges. I want to share first. Okay, as a former reporter myself, briefly, I would say one of the advantages is everybody's connected, so it's easy to get information, to get access. And one of the disadvantages is everybody's connected.
Via the coconut wire, right?
So it can work for you or it can work against.
Coconut wire, yeah.
What's your thought?
Well, one of the first lessons I learned here when I first came to Saipan as a journalist is don't forget the middle initials.
Oh, yeah.
There's a 1I Camacho, 1L Camacho,
And there's
one
more than
F Camacho.
more than one of them.
Yeah, so you really have to be particular. And as you said about the interconnecting thing, you have to be very careful when reporting the news. You might be turning off one family, and everybody's like family here. So you really have to be careful and be mindful of your sources. That's why that's why you have to get both sides of the coin. If there's a contrasting opinion, then try to get the other. So everybody would be represented, and nobody would say that you're biased, which is hard sometimes because of the deadline. But we always tell them there's the next day. Sadly for Saipan Tribune, the next day didn't come after December 31, 2024.
So hopefully everybody got to say their piece before that. But are there any particular stories or experiences you've had that kind of speak to the unique way news is done here in the Marianas? I can think of my experience, going to a hearing on a bill and somebody had testified, went back and did the news, and it was their position was the total opposite of what I understood and wrote in my story. So basically they said, we're against it, for example, and I wrote, oh, they're for it, and they could have been so mad, but the representative just came to me and said, you're mistaken. And I was like, oh gosh, let's correct it. So we did the next day. But what has your experience been?
When it comes to the uniqueness of working in Saipan as a journalist, sometimes there are laws in the legislature that's already there that they will be introducing. Right?
Is this something like you're already aware of the law, or in your research you kind of figured out?
In your research, and they always say that. And I think we have more empathy here compared to, like, for instance, when Assange came, Julian Assange, I think in July, I think that's the biggest news of the year, last year, right? So, there was a media circus. More than 50 to, I think, 70 journalists from everywhere came here. And they're like all busy, wrestling each other to get news. But the local media were like, okay, chill. You're here, but while you're here, try to enjoy the beaches. We're not just about work here. We still did the work. But if you ask me what's the hardest time I had in the past year working for Saipan Tribune, that was it. Because, of course, I was covering it not for Saipan Tribune. Kimberly was there. I was covering it in behalf of Wall Street Journal, The Telegram. So I had to do that in the morning. I was up like 6 o'clock. That ended like 12. At 1 o'clock, I had to close the paper. So that was a grind. That was the most challenging time of the year for me as the editor.
And that's another interesting thing that you've done is you've been a correspondent for national and international media, Wall Street Journal and who else?
Telegram, Radio New Zealand, Marianas Business Journal. I just get picked up by Pacific Daily News, so that's something. And I'm also a sports columnist for Manila Times, which is my old home in the Philippines, my old newspaper.
So what kind of stories do you think, do you find the national or international media are interested in?
Just general stuff. You have to re-angle stuff. Of course, if somebody died here, that's number one. Regional news already for Radio New Zealand. Like the Assange case. A former reporter here actually called me who works for WSJ now and told me, oh, I have a scoop. But you have to sign an NDA first so nobody would know about it. So sadly, we had super typhoons, Sodolor and Yutu happened here. It didn't garner much international attention because nobody died, they said.
Well, that should have garnered international attention. Maybe they could have learned something.
Yeah, so that's in a way, I've learned that what's important in the CNMI is not really important for other news outlets.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, usually controversy, somebody got impeached, somebody died, typhoons.
The economy, I think.
The economy, especially tourism, especially that they know that we are a one industry community, one industry island. We have tourism.
Mm-hmm.
So funnily, when Saipan Ribbon closed, it was a big story for Radio New Zealand.
Mm.
I think they interviewed me and I did a piece for them. Mm-hmm.
What do you find they don't know about us that you would have maybe expected that they would?
Sometimes they still think of us as a country. They don't think of the CNMI as a territory of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and especially with the tensions with China, they kind of lump us together with Guam too. But we're a totally different territory than Guam.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes somebody from Radio New Zealand would ask me to do stories for Guam. I'm said it's a 30-minute plane ride away from me. I can't do that. Yeah.
I know one thing that a lot of readers and consumers are interested in are investigative stories. How does that factor into the considerations of an editor, whether resources will be invested into an investigative story?
First and foremost, you have to have manpower. In the past 5 years, I think we've gone from an 8-reporter outfit to basically a 1 sports reporter, 1 news reporter outfit. We used to have two editors, me and JV, our good friend. Sorry, I didn't call him Panfilo, okay? So we were quite a robust team before. So we had time to do investigative reporting. I remember we did a reporting about how responsive government agencies are with the Freedom of Information Act. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of good investigative stories. And Ferdy De La Torre, who was our senior reporter for the longest time, I think he's the longest tenured reporter here ever since. I think
left in 2024.
Yeah, I think August. So he did some investigative reporting, and he said it's quite scary sometimes because because he dealt with police and courts. So, and plus on the island you can't really disguise yourself because it's such a small island. Everybody knows you. Mm-hmm.
True.
So when the newsroom gets cut into half or sometimes a fourth of what it used to be, there goes the investigative reporting side of it.
Just as a matter of practicality.
Yeah,
it's not that you're not interested or you're ignoring the topic.
Mm-hmm.
It's just...
there's just no manpower.
Yeah.
But I would like to do that with my new media outfits because it's not just a one-shot deal. You really have to dig in, weeks and months to see, you know, especially with corruption cases.
Because you want to be fair and you want to be accurate.
Because the biggest sin of a reporter is not doing enough investigation or not doing enough research. And you just write it for just the sake of it, just to beat the other competitor.
So, although you have departed after over 2 decades at the Saipan Tribune, your current endeavors still have you in the newsroom under a slightly different format. Can you share with us just a little bit about that?
January 31, December 31, we bid adieu to Saipan Tribune. And the very next day, January 1, I started with Marianas Press. Thomas Manglonia used to be our correspondent. So I'm familiar with his work, and he's a editing savant, journalist par excellence. So I'm happy to combine forces with him, and hopefully Marianas Press would satiate the appetite of the CNMI, which just lost a pillar of journalism when Saipan Tribune closed. So we're just building on, or trying to continue, the tradition of Saipan Tribune with Marianas Press.
And you were saying that one of the first things you've noticed is how fast the news gets out in this format versus previous format.
On Saipan Tribune, we'll write the story, give it to the layout artist. It gets printed, gets out in the stores like 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and it gets published online like 6 a.m. too. I remember I did my first story for Marianas Press yesterday. I did the CNMI New Year Baby, and I think I went there 6 o'clock. I did the interview in under 30 minutes. I went home like 7. I wrote the story in 30 minutes, and by that time, Thomas was also editing my videos. It was out 40 minutes after my interview finished. So it was bam, bam, stories out. Not breaking news, not a few sentences, video and complete story. So instant gratification for anyone who wants to consume news there.
Who wants to know what's going on right now.
Yeah. Those people who don't have work, like me, well, full-time work.
Mark, thank you so much. Thank you for your service, of course, up until now and continuing. I'm sure if people have any questions about journalism and why and how, and they might be coming up to you now. Sorry, but
so I have to start my consulting firm, so I get paid, right?
Whatever it takes.
Thanks, Kathy.
Any final thoughts before we go?
Happy New Year, and like and subscribe, Marianas Press.
Well said. Our guest today has been Mark Rabago, speaking about journalism in general and a little bit about what happens particularly here in the Marianas. Over 20 years with the Saipan Tribune as a reporter and then an editor. This has been your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
Your Humanities Half Hour has been made possible in part by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Democracy demands wisdom. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. For more information or to share your thoughts, contact the Northern Marianas Humanities Council at nmhcouncil.org or on social media at 670 Humanities. That's 670 Humanities.